Billionaire family mocked black CEO at Gala. Then she canceled their $4 billion deal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. It was a night filled with gold chandeliers, soft jazz music, and the unmistakable clink of expensive glasses in the air. The elite of Silicon Valley and Hollywood gathered at the exclusive Parkview estate for one of the most anticipated events of the year. A gala dinner to celebrate a massive investment deal, the type that would shift the balance of power in the tech world. But there was a moment, an instant, when the room shifted. The whispers, the quiet smirks, and the knowing glances filled the air. At the heart of this glamorous affair sat Veronica Hayes, the founder and CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company, Hayes Innovations. A woman of extraordinary brilliance and success. Yet tonight, she was an outsider in a room full of people who believed they had it all. Veronica was a black woman, and she knew exactly what that meant in this world of power, wealth, and privilege. She wasn't invited to this gala out of respect. She was invited because her company had something the billionaires here needed, a groundbreaking new technology that could change the world. But as Veronica quietly sipped her champagne, she couldn't ignore the tension in the air. The undercurrent of discrimination and the subtle but biting remarks being made at her expense. The night's host, Andrew Blackstone, a billionaire tech mogul and self-proclaimed king of the valley, made no effort to hide his disdain. He couldn't understand why someone like Veronica, a woman of color, could command such respect in the tech world. As he sat across from her at the head of the table, his smirk grew wider. He leaned over to his wife, Madeline, and whispered just loud enough for Veronica to hear. What's the point of even negotiating with her? She's not even from here. Does she even know how this industry works? The words hung in the air, cutting through the polite chatter of the room like a blade. The murmurs grew louder. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one dared to speak up. It wasn't just Andrew's words. It was the way he looked at Veronica, as if she was some exotic creature in a glass cage, there to be admired but never truly understood. Veronica remained calm, her eyes locked on the glass in front of her, but inside, her pulse quickened. She had faced this kind of treatment before, where her worth was questioned because of her race, where her intellect was overshadowed by prejudice. But tonight, it would be different. This was not just another boardroom battle or another meeting with men who thought their money gave them the right to dismiss her. This was her moment. The room was filled with people who believed they were in control. They thought their wealth and their power could dictate the terms of the deal. But Veronica knew something they didn't. She knew that power wasn't always in the hands of the wealthy and the privileged. Sometimes, it was in the hands of the ones who had been overlooked, the ones who had been dismissed as invisible, the ones who were willing to stand up and take back what was rightfully theirs. And tonight, Veronica Hayes would show them just how wrong they were. As the night progressed, the tension in the room thickened. Andrew Blackstone's words had cut deeper than Veronica had expected. She had known that many in the room would dismiss her, but the blatant disregard for her intelligence and the veiled racial insults were something else. Her hands, which had once been steady, were now gripping the edge of her wine glass tightly. She looked around the table, trying to focus on the faces of those who were pretending not to hear, the ones who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Andrew's words echoed in her mind, each one a reminder of the challenges she had faced to get to this point. But Veronica was no stranger to challenges. She had built Hayes Innovations from the ground up, a company that had changed the game in artificial intelligence and renewable energy. She had faced endless obstacles, from being overlooked for promotions to dealing with the constant reminder that as a black woman in a predominantly white industry, she would always have to work twice as hard to earn half the recognition. But tonight, it wasn't just about her success. It was about the deal on the table, a $4 billion investment that could change the future of her company and the world. And yet, here she was, being mocked in front of the very people who would benefit from her innovation. Veronica's mind raced as she listened to the ongoing chatter at the table. The words were becoming a blur of noise, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had to do something. She had to show them that they couldn't treat her this way. She wasn't just a token, a figurehead. She was the reason they were even at this table. She was the one holding the power in this room, even if they didn't realize it yet. And so, Veronica stood up slowly, her movements graceful but deliberate. She caught the attention of the entire room, the murmur of conversation dying down as all eyes turned toward her. Andrew Blackstone, who had been so confident moments ago, looked up from his phone with a quizzical expression, as if he couldn't believe she was interrupting his conversation. But Veronica wasn't asking for permission. She wasn't here to beg or to please. She had made it clear to her team that she wouldn't tolerate disrespect, not from anyone, no matter how much money they had or how much influence they wielded. "Gentlemen," Veronica said, her voice calm but firm, "I think it's time we discuss the terms of this deal." The room went silent, the air thick with anticipation. Andrew's smug smile faded, replaced by a look of surprise. He had been expecting her to apologize, to back down. But Veronica wasn't that kind of woman. She wasn't here to apologize for her success or for being who she was. She had worked too hard, fought too many battles to let a room full of wealthy men make her feel small. The CEO of Hayes Innovations wasn't someone you could simply push around. "The deal is off," Veronica continued, her gaze never leaving Andrew's. "I don't need to explain myself to you, Mr. Blackstone. But I will explain this. I'm not going to be part of a negotiation where I'm disrespected. I built this company. I'm the reason you're even sitting at this table." The shock in Andrew's eyes was palpable. He looked around the room, searching for support, but found none. His face reddened as he realized what was happening. The tables had turned. Veronica wasn't just canceling a deal. She was rewriting the power dynamics of the room. The very deal that had seemed like a win for the billionaires in the room was now slipping through their fingers. As the silence stretched on, Veronica's decision became clear to everyone present. She had taken control, not just of the situation, but of her own narrative. The room was frozen, unsure of what to do next. But Veronica knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't here to make friends. She wasn't here to play their game. She was here to show them that respect couldn't be bought with billions of dollars. It had to be earned. Veronica had earned hers a long time ago. As Veronica stood there, her words echoing in the silence, the weight of her decision began to sink in. She wasn't just changing the course of a business deal. She was challenging the very fabric of the power dynamics that had shaped the industry for decades. The room, once filled with whispers and laughter, now felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension. Every eye was on her, waiting for a reaction, an apology, anything that would signal she had made a mistake. But Veronica wasn't going to make that mistake. She wasn't going to back down. Not tonight. Not ever. Andrew Blackstone, who had been so sure of himself just moments ago, now sat frozen in disbelief. He looked like a man who had just realized he had underestimated the wrong person. Veronica had taken the upper hand, and there was nothing he could do to get it back. He leaned back in his chair, his face a mixture of frustration and disbelief, as if the whole room was suddenly spinning out of his control. The other guests, once silently complicit in his mockery, now shifted uneasily in their seats. They were witnessing something they hadn't expected, a woman, a black woman, standing up for herself, showing them that she would no longer tolerate being underestimated. The silence in the room stretched on, thick and uncomfortable, until finally, Andrew cleared his throat. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice tight. "You can't just walk away from a deal like this. It's worth $4 billion. Veronica didn't flinch. "I'm not walking away from anything," she replied calmly. "But I'm not going to sit here and let you treat me like I'm some sort of token to be paraded around for your amusement. You disrespected me, and now you're going to feel the consequences." She turned to the rest of the room, addressing them all. "This isn't about money. It's about respect. It's about dignity. And if you can't see that, then maybe we're not the right fit for each other." The room was silent for a long moment. And then, one by one, the other executives in the room began to shift in their seats. It wasn't as though they were suddenly on Veronica's side. No, they were just realizing that she had something they didn't. She had integrity. She had courage. And as much as they had dismissed her earlier, they were starting to understand that she was in control of this situation. Andrew, trying to regain his composure, leaned forward again. "You're making a huge mistake," he repeated, this time with less conviction. But Veronica wasn't interested in his pleas. She had already made up her mind. The deal is off, she said, her voice final. And I'm not interested in negotiating with someone who can't see me as an equal. She turned to her assistant, who had been standing by, waiting for the moment to act. Send the formal notice, she said. Let them know we're withdrawing from the deal. As her assistant moved to carry out the task, Veronica took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of the room's gaze on her, but it didn't faze her. She had been through so much worse in her career, facing down men who thought they could intimidate her, looking down on her because of her race and her gender. But tonight, she had turned the tables. Tonight, she had made it clear that she was not to be underestimated. The power dynamics had shifted. The wealthy, influential men in the room could no longer dictate her worth. And in that moment, Veronica Hayes knew that her decision was the right one. She had stood her ground, and she had made them see her. Not as a token, not as an accessory to their power, but as a force in her own right. And that, she knew, was more valuable than any $4 billion deal. As Veronica's assistant swiftly moved to handle the formal withdrawal of the deal, the room remained unnervingly quiet. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to feel like a physical presence. The wealthy executives, once confident in their ability to control the situation, were now left fumbling for words. Veronica had taken the reins, and they could only watch as she demonstrated the kind of leadership they had failed to acknowledge before. Andrew Blackstone, who had once believed he could dictate the terms of any room he entered, now found himself powerless in front of a woman who had just shown him that money, power, and arrogance meant nothing when true integrity was on the line. He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. The smug expression that had once dominated his face had been replaced with something closer to frustration. Veronica could see that he was trying to find a way to save face, but it was too late. The damage had been done. You know, Andrew began, his voice now tinged with irritation. You may have won this battle, but you're making an enemy of the wrong people. Veronica looked at him, her expression unwavering. I'm not here to make friends, she said, her voice calm but firm. I'm here to make sure that my company, my team, and my future are treated with the respect they deserve. If you can't understand that, then you're right. You and I will never be on the same side. There was a long silence before Andrew let out a frustrated sigh. Fine, he muttered, clearly upset but defeated. But don't think this is over. People like me, we don't forget. Veronica didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. The empty threats from men who thought their wealth could protect them from accountability. You can't scare me with your money, Andrew, she replied. I didn't get to where I am by running from challenges. If you want to keep making threats, that's on you. But the deal is over. With that, Veronica turned and walked toward the door. She had made her point, and now it was time to leave. As she stepped out of the room, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, a moment of true empowerment. She had stood up for herself when no one else would. She had taken control of her own narrative. As Veronica left the building, her assistant followed closely behind, her eyes wide with admiration. I can't believe you actually did it, her assistant said, awe in her voice. You showed them all what you're made of. Veronica smiled, but there was no time for celebration just yet. She still had a company to run, and now that she had cleared the air with those who doubted her, it was time to focus on what really mattered. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced down and saw that it was a message from her lead investor, Michael Graves. He had been in the loop on everything and was aware of the fallout from the gala. The message read, Veronica, I heard what happened tonight. Don't worry about Andrew or anyone else. You've got my full support. Let's talk tomorrow. We're in this together. Veronica felt a surge of relief. It wasn't just about the money. It was about knowing that there were people who truly understood her vision, who were willing to stand by her no matter what. She typed back quickly, Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. We'll talk tomorrow. As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, she felt the weight of the night lift. She had made the right choice. She had reclaimed her power, and now, nothing could stop her from building the future she had always envisioned. The next morning, Veronica woke up early, the events of the previous night still fresh in her mind. She had expected to feel a sense of relief, but instead, there was a quiet sense of determination that fueled her as she sipped her coffee in the peaceful solitude of her apartment. She had made the right choice, but now the real work began. There was still so much to do. As she glanced out of her apartment window at the city below, Veronica felt a renewed sense of purpose. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue over the skyline, a symbol of the new chapter that had just begun in her life. Last night had been a turning point. It wasn't just about canceling a deal or standing up to Andrew Blackstone. It was about making sure that her voice, her vision, and her worth were recognized. It was about building a future where she didn't have to ask for permission to succeed. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her chief financial officer, Kelly. Veronica, we've received multiple calls this morning, including from a few major investors. It seems like word of last night's decision has spread, and there's a lot of interest in what we do next. Veronica smiled, feeling a wave of satisfaction. She had expected some backlash, but what she hadn't anticipated was how quickly the business world would begin to take notice. It wasn't just about the money, it was about respect, and now, more than ever, people were taking her seriously. She typed back quickly, "Let's schedule a meeting with our top investors. I want to show them the direction we're headed. No more waiting around." It was time for her to step fully into her power, to take control of her own narrative in a way that would make others listen. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls, and by the time the afternoon rolled around, Veronica was sitting in a sleek conference room with her team and a group of eager investors. The atmosphere in the room was different from the one she had encountered at the gala. There was no condescension, no dismissive glances. The respect was palpable. She stood at the head of the table, confident and poised, her presentation ready to show them the next phase of her company's evolution. "Ladies and gentlemen," Veronica began, "I know last night may have shocked some of you, but I want to make one thing clear. The future of Hayes Innovations is about more than just technology. It's about integrity. It's about pushing boundaries. And it's about making sure that we are respected for the value we bring to the table." The investors, many of whom had initially hesitated to fully commit, now leaned forward, listening intently. The room was no longer filled with doubt. Instead, there was a collective sense of anticipation, a belief in what Veronica had to offer. "I'm not interested in being part of any deal where my company is treated as a side project or a token investment. We've created something groundbreaking, and I'm not going to let anyone undermine that. If you want to be part of this journey, it's because you believe in what we're building, not because of some quick profit," Veronica continued, her voice unwavering. As she spoke, Veronica could see the shift in the room. The investors who had once questioned her were now nodding in agreement. Their faces were no longer filled with skepticism, but with recognition of the power of her vision. This was the moment she had worked for, the moment when she would no longer be underestimated. The meeting went on for hours, but by the end of it, Veronica had secured commitments from every investor in the room. The deal wasn't just back on, it was stronger than ever. The next day, as the news of her success spread, Veronica sat in her office, reflecting on everything she had overcome. It wasn't just about the $4 billion deal. It was about proving that, no matter how many obstacles were placed in her path, she would rise above them. She wasn't just a black woman in a male-dominated industry. She was a leader, and the world was starting to see that. The phone rang again, and Veronica picked up the call without hesitation. It was Michael Graves, the lead investor who had supported her from the start. "Veronica, I just wanted to say, you handled that brilliantly. The entire investment community is talking about you. They're realizing they can't afford to ignore you any longer." Veronica smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. "Thank you, Michael. I think they're finally getting the message." She hung up the phone, feeling more confident than ever. The battle had been tough, but the war was far from over. And Veronica Hayes was ready to lead the charge. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and strategic decisions. Veronica found herself at the helm of a company that was gaining momentum, but she wasn't about to rest on her laurels. The world had taken notice of her strength and conviction, and now it was time to build on that foundation. She had proven that she was a force to be reckoned with, but she knew that maintaining control meant continuously pushing forward. As the weeks passed, the buzz surrounding Veronica's bold decision began to grow. Media outlets, investors, and even competitors were paying attention. Her name became synonymous with power, not just in the tech world, but in every boardroom. Across the country, The respect she had fought for had now solidified her place as a true leader. But with that respect came new challenges. Veronica faced a barrage of new demands from both existing partners and potential investors who now wanted a piece of Hayes Innovations. They were no longer viewing her as a token or a novelty. They were seeing her for what she truly was, a visionary. While it was flattering to have the world's elite suddenly clamoring to be a part of her journey, Veronica knew better than to get distracted. She had a clear vision for the future of her company, and she wasn't about to let the distractions derail her plans. One afternoon, Veronica sat in her office overlooking the city, a cup of coffee in hand, as she thought about the path ahead. She had already made history with her decision to cancel the deal with Andrew Blackstone. Now, she was determined to shape the future. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Michael Graves, the lead investor who had been with her from the beginning. "Veronica," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "I just got off the phone with a few people. They want to back Hayes Innovations, and I mean big time. These are some of the top investors in the industry, and they're all in. But they need to see one thing from you, a clear direction for the future. They want to know where you're headed, and they need to be confident that you're in full control." Veronica leaned back in her chair, taking a moment to process the news. This was it. This was the moment where she had to step up and show everyone, investors, competitors, and even herself, that she was the one who would lead Hayes Innovations to new heights. "Let's set up a meeting," she said, her tone decisive. "It's time to take the next step." A week later, Veronica stood before a group of the most influential investors in the world. They were eager, hungry for the opportunity to invest in Hayes Innovations, but they needed reassurance that Veronica was the right person to lead them into the future. As she stood before them, she felt a wave of calm wash over her. She had been in similar situations before, but this time felt different. This time, she knew exactly what she was capable of. "Gentlemen, I appreciate the interest you've shown in Hayes Innovations," Veronica began, her voice steady and confident. "But let me make something clear, we're not just another company. We're not here to play it safe. We're here to change the world. Our work in artificial intelligence and renewable energy isn't just about profitability, it's about impact. It's about creating a future that works for everyone, not just for the elite few. And if you want to be a part of that future, then you'll need to be ready to think bigger than you ever have before." The room fell silent, each investor hanging on her every word. Veronica could see the hesitation in some of their eyes, but she could also see the spark of interest. They had heard her message, loud and clear. She wasn't just a CEO, she was a game changer. As the meeting came to a close, Michael Graves leaned over and whispered, "You nailed it, Veronica. They're on board. You've got the support you need." Veronica smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. This was just the beginning. She had taken on the world's most powerful figures and walked away victorious. And now, with her vision for Hayes Innovations clearer than ever, she was ready to take on whatever came next. The power dynamics had shifted, and Veronica Hayes was now firmly in control. No one would ever be able to dismiss her again. She had earned her place at the table, and now, she was setting the course for a future that no one could have predicted. As the days passed, the ripple effect from Veronica's bold decision at the gala continued to reverberate through the business world. Hayes Innovations had become a name synonymous with power, integrity, and resilience. But with every victory came a new set of challenges. Veronica's leadership was no longer questioned, but now the real test began. Could she sustain the momentum? Could she turn her newfound respect into lasting success? Veronica sat in her office late one evening, reviewing plans for the next phase of expansion. The phone calls had slowed, but the pressure had not. Investors wanted results, and the world expected her company to deliver on the promises it had made. She had been so focused on proving herself to the world that she hadn't fully anticipated the relentless demands of the spotlight. Her company's success hinged not only on the groundbreaking technology they were developing, but also on maintaining their reputation. As she tapped away at her laptop, her assistant, Kelly, knocked and entered, holding a stack of papers. "Veronica, we've got a new offer," Kelly said, her voice tinged with excitement. "From another venture capital group. They're offering a significant amount of funding, but they want a majority stake in exchange for their investment." Veronica leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. Another offer, another group trying to take control. It wasn't the first time this had happened, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. The world saw her success as an opportunity to capitalize, but they also saw her as someone to be controlled. She had fought too hard to let anyone take away what she had built. "Let's schedule a call with them," Veronica replied, her voice calm but firm. "But I'm not interested in giving up control. We need investors who respect our vision, not just our bottom line." Kelly nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. As the meeting with the venture capital group loomed, Veronica prepared herself. She wasn't afraid of the negotiation table. She had made her mark by standing up to some of the most powerful people in the world. This meeting would be no different. The day of the call arrived, and Veronica was ready. She sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by her top team members. The venture capitalists, a group of wealthy investors who had made their fortunes in tech, appeared on the screen, their faces impassive. The offer was tempting, hundreds of millions of dollars for a controlling stake in Hayes Innovations, but it came with strings attached. "We believe in the potential of your company, Veronica," one of the investors began. "But we need more control if we're going to make this work. You've done well so far, but you need to expand faster. We have the resources to make that happen, but we need the final say on key decisions." Veronica listened carefully, her expression unreadable. She had heard it all before. The promises of quick success, the assurances that their involvement would be the key to turning Hayes Innovations into a global giant. But Veronica knew better than to sacrifice her autonomy for the sake of speed. "I understand your concerns," Veronica said, her tone steady. "But I've built this company on my terms, and I won't give up control just to expand quickly. I'm looking for partners who share my vision, not just my bank account." The room fell silent. The investors seemed taken aback, not expecting such a strong response. But Veronica wasn't about to let them push her around. "If you're willing to respect my vision and take a back seat on decision-making, then we can talk. But if you're looking for a majority stake to control the direction of the company, then we're done here," Veronica continued, her voice unwavering. After a long pause, the investors exchanged glances, clearly surprised by Veronica's confidence. Finally, one of them spoke. "We'll need to discuss internally, but we respect your position. Let's reconvene in a few days." Veronica smiled inwardly, knowing that she had just won another round. She had held firm to her principles, and the investors had no choice but to respect her boundaries. She wasn't just leading a company, she was leading with integrity. And as the meeting came to a close, Veronica knew that the battle for control was far from over. But she was ready. She had faced far worse, and each challenge only made her stronger. As she left the meeting, she felt a sense of satisfaction. Hayes Innovations wasn't just a company. It was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. And with every decision she made, she was one step closer to building a future that no one could take away. As the weeks passed, Veronica's vision for Hayes Innovations began to take shape. The deal with the venture capitalists was still on the table, but now it was more of a negotiation than a demand. Veronica had made it clear that she would never sacrifice her autonomy for the sake of quick profits, and the investors, while initially hesitant, had come to respect her for it. It was a pivotal moment. Hayes Innovations was growing, and it was clear that Veronica was the driving force behind its success. But with that success came new pressures. The pressure to deliver, to outperform, and to maintain the integrity of the company while expanding it at a rapid pace. Veronica was used to working under pressure, but she could feel the weight of the expectations bearing down on her. She had built this company from nothing, but now, with the stakes higher than ever, she had to ensure that the world would see her as more than just a successful CEO. She had to show them that she was a true leader. One morning, she walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. Her team was hard at work, preparing for a major product launch that could further solidify their position as a leader in the industry. The technology they were developing had the potential to change the way people interacted with renewable energy, and the world was watching. But despite all the progress, there was still one lingering challenge. One of the biggest competitors in the industry, a global tech giant, had begun to take notice of Hayes Innovations and its disruptive potential. The company, led by a powerful and ruthless CEO named Greg Thornton, had long dominated the renewable energy sector, and they saw Veronica's company as a threat to their empire. Veronica knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move. And sure enough, a few days later, An unexpected call came through. "Veronica, it's Greg Thornton," the voice on the other end of the line said, his tone cold and calculating. "I've been keeping an eye on your company. Impressive work. But I'll be honest with you. If you keep pushing forward like this, you're going to face some serious obstacles. The way I see it, we either become partners or we become rivals. And I'm not sure which one you'd prefer." Veronica leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had heard of Greg Thornton's reputation. He was known for swallowing up competitors, absorbing their innovations, and using his vast resources to crush anyone who got in his way. But Veronica wasn't the type to back down. She had already taken on the biggest players in the industry and come out on top. "I'm not interested in becoming anyone's partner, Greg," she said calmly, her voice firm. "If you want to make us rivals, then that's your choice. But I'm not going to stop. Hayes Innovations is here to stay, and we will continue to push forward." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Greg spoke again. "You're making a mistake, Veronica," he said, his voice tinged with both amusement and menace. "But I respect your tenacity. Let's see how long that lasts." With that, the call ended. Veronica sat in silence for a moment, taking in what had just happened. Greg Thornton's words had been a warning, but they also confirmed what she already knew. Hayes Innovations was a threat, and they were going to have to fight to protect what they had built. Veronica wasn't afraid of Greg Thornton or anyone else. She had fought too hard to get to where she was, and she wasn't about to let some corporate bully take that away from her. The next day, she gathered her team for an urgent meeting. "We're about to enter a new phase," she said, standing at the head of the conference table. "Greg Thornton and his company are going to try to stop us. They'll do whatever it takes to crush us, but we're not backing down. We're stronger than they think, and together, we will take Hayes Innovations to the next level." The room was filled with determination. Veronica's team had followed her through thick and thin, and now they were more united than ever. The competition with Greg Thornton was only just beginning, but Veronica was ready. She wasn't just leading a company, she was leading a movement. And no one, especially Greg Thornton, was going to stand in her way. Months passed, and Veronica continued to steer Hayes Innovations with the same relentless determination that had gotten her this far. The competition with Greg Thornton and his global tech empire was fierce, but Veronica wasn't one to back down. She had spent her entire career proving that she belonged, and now, she was proving it all over again. The market was watching closely, as Hayes Innovations had begun to release new products that were starting to redefine the renewable energy landscape. The technology was unlike anything the world had seen before, innovative, scalable, and sustainable. It wasn't just about competing with the big players like Greg Thornton anymore. It was about changing the way the world approached energy. As Hayes Innovations expanded its reach, Veronica knew that the battles weren't just about beating competitors in the boardroom or on the market. They were about changing the narrative, showing the world that a black woman could rise to the top of a male-dominated industry, not through compromise, but through strength and innovation. But even with all the success, Veronica knew she wasn't done. Yet, one day, she stood before her team in their sleek headquarters, looking out over the city skyline, a symbol of all that they had built. Her voice was steady, filled with conviction, as she addressed them. "We've come a long way," she said, pausing to let the weight of her words sink in. "But this is just the beginning. We've faced challenges, and we've won. We've stood up for what's right, and now we're changing the world. I'm not done yet. We're not done yet. This company, this vision, it's bigger than any one person. We're building something that will last, something that will change the future for generations to come." Her team erupted in applause, the energy in the room electric. The battle with Greg Thornton had not been easy, but it had made them stronger. Veronica had made it clear that Hayes Innovations wasn't just a company, it was a movement. And with every step forward, they were proving that their vision was unstoppable. As the months turned into years, Hayes Innovations continued to grow, and so did Veronica's reputation. She was no longer just a successful CEO. She was a symbol of resilience, a beacon of what was possible when someone refused to let the world define their worth. Greg Thornton, once the dominant force in the renewable energy sector, watched from the sidelines as Hayes Innovations gained ground, each new product release more successful than the last. He had underestimated Veronica, and now it was clear that his arrogance had been his downfall. Hayes Innovations was on track to become a global leader, and Veronica Hayes was the woman at the helm, guiding them with the same unwavering conviction she had shown from the very beginning. The world had learned a powerful lesson. Respect couldn't be bought, it had to be earned. And Veronica Hayes had earned it, not just once, but time and time again. Her story was no longer just a story of overcoming obstacles. It was a story of creating something greater than herself, of empowering others to believe in their own potential. As the sun set over the city, Veronica stood at the window, looking out at the horizon. She had come a long way from the woman who had once been dismissed at that gala. Now, she was more than just a CEO. She was a leader, a visionary, and a force to be reckoned with. And as she looked ahead, she knew that there was still so much more to do. But for the first time, she wasn't just fighting for survival. She was building a legacy that would last for generations. In this inspiring journey of perseverance and triumph, a powerful Black CEO rises against all odds to break barriers in the tech industry. After facing prejudice and disrespect at a high-profile gala, she takes a stand and cancels a multi-billion-dollar deal, making a bold statement in the business world. As this Black story unfolds, it showcases how resilience, integrity, and determination can transform the course of a career. From a challenging start to leading a groundbreaking tech company, this story highlights the strength of a Black woman who refuses to be underestimated. The saga continues as she navigates fierce competition, including powerful adversaries like Greg Thornton, the CEO of a global tech giant. As she battles to protect her company and vision, this Black story reminds us all that power is not just about wealth. It's about respect and standing firm in one's convictions. Through her leadership, this Black story proves that breaking through obstacles is possible, regardless of who tries to stand in your way. Her journey not only challenges the norms of the industry, but also empowers others to believe in their worth. As the future unfolds, the legacy of this Black CEO will undoubtedly inspire generations, showing that when you fight for what's right, anything is possible.